Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Nora Trenicosta from Text Help. We are very glad that you are here joining us today. I see a lot of familiar names there, and we are looking forward to digging into the the topic of the day is Read and Write for assessments. I'm coming to you from my home office in California, so most of the folks close to me are thinking about the CASP. We also have friends joining us from Oregon with their Oaks state test, and then we also have the state test in Washington. All of those are based on the Smarter Balanced platform, so that's what we're going to focus on for today. And I wanted to talk about my team and who is here with us today. So Greg, you want to say hello?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Greg Crisolo. I'm the Territory Director for Text Help. I'm based out of Southern California in San Diego. So I support schools and community colleges and colleges for all of our programs. So most of, again, Southern California, but for higher ed, I support our campuses in all the West Coast and support Nora as well. So yeah, thanks, Nora.
And Greg will be in the chat window with you guys. If you have any questions that you want to ask of us as the presenters, please feel free to ask those questions in the chat window. We are recording this webinar, so once I get that captioned, I will send out the link. So just know if you ask a question over there in the chat window, it'll be nice and private for you. And I am Nora Trenicosta. I think I know most of you. Your regional sales director coming to you from my home office here in Northern California. And we are joined today by Jason Carroll, who is our global product manager for literacy at Text Help. And he is the guy that's in the trenches with all this SBAC stuff. So I really wanted you guys to hear from somebody more than just me and Greg about what we're able to do for you going into this busy assessment season. So hello, Jason.
Hey, Nora. Look forward to chatting with everyone. Happy to be here.
Excellent. We're glad to have you. Just wanted to take a quick moment to talk about, many of you I see here on the webinar are confirmed Read and Write users. And I want to make sure that you guys understand that your Read and Write license is a family license. It includes access to all the different platforms of Read and Write for Mac, Read and Write for Android tablets, for iPads, for Windows, locally installed on the Windows computer. We have a Microsoft Edge extension and Read and Write for Google Chrome, which I think probably most of you are using. I just wanted to touch bases with you and make sure you knew that we're going to be focusing primarily on our Chromebook users today, but we're here to answer questions if you have them. Greg, we're going to go ahead and launch a poll here. So we just wanted to ask a poll to kind of get an idea of who was joining us today. So we're just going to be launching a quick poll to kind of get a feel for who is joining us and how we might be able to help you answer any questions that you might have. Wow, lots of technology staff. That's great. All right, I'll give you guys just another minute or two to weigh in, but it seems like many of you are joining us on the tech side, which we're really happy about. So that gives us kind of an idea of what you might need to know. I wanted to just give you guys just a quick peek. If any of you aren't super familiar with Read and Write for Google Chrome, it is an extension, which means it's attached to who you are as a user inside Google, and it will work anytime that you're in your Google Drive. So it works exactly the same on a Mac PC or a Chromebook. And here's just a little cheat for you, so just kind of remind you what the different toolbars look like. So this top toolbar is what our Read and Write toolbar looks like when you're inside a Google Doc. So we can do all kinds of awesome things in there. Here's what it looks like in a slide, in a PDF. I know not all of you are using EPUBs, but Bookshare users, give me a holler if you want to know how to get those Bookshare EPUBs into your Google Drive. And then here's what it looks like on websites in the Chrome browser. So these are all things that you're familiar with, But today we want to talk about how to use Read and Write for Google Chrome that your students are used to, how to use something that's familiar for them in the SBAC situation. So I just wanted to make one more, just kind of double check a poll. I want to make sure, you know, that if we're got a lot of Microsoft users, that we're making sure that we get you the information that you need as well. And I'll give you just another moment, but so far it looks like all of you guys are Google users, which is pretty much what we were thinking about talking about today. So that's super helpful. All right. So you guys are all Google users. We'll be in the Google area today. So just reminding you that Read and Write for Google Chrome works exactly the same on the Mac PC or Chromebook, but we have a different situation when we need to get into the testing environment. When you're in your regular instruction, you know that you can use the toolbars to support Common Core standards, and you know that you can also use the toolbars to mirror what's happening inside the testing environment in your daily instruction. And just to recall that you may be focusing quite a bit on accommodations. So some of your students who might need voice recognition, other students who might need translation or text-to-speech. Sometimes we focus so much on making sure that our students are ready to use the accommodations that we forget to make sure that all of our students know how to use the universal supports. You know, starting in 3rd or 4th grade, your students are going to be using highlighters to cite evidence from the text. And many of our students are not familiar with the traditional dictionary. They're probably more used to looking things up online. And it's a very different set of mental muscles that you're flexing to do a Google search and use a dictionary.
No, sorry, Jason here. I still see the poll up from the Google or Microsoft.
Thank you.
You bet.
Here we go. So thank you, Jason. So here's just a little reminder to you guys about how you might want to think about using your regular Read and Write for Google Chrome tools to mirror the things that are going to happen in the testing environment, so that when your students go to take your state test, that they're ready to take it. So just remember, you can focus on those accommodations, but you also want to make sure that you're taking some time to prepare your students to use the universal supports. And that's something that you can be doing in your daily instruction with Read and Write. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn things over to Jason, and he is going to share with you absolutely the latest and the greatest about Read and Write for assessment. So it'll be just a moment here while I share that with him.
Okay, Nora, hopefully you can see my screen now, right?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Jason.
Okay, excellent. Let me go to presentation view here. And yeah, we'll talk a bit about Read and Write for assessments. This is something that, due to many requests, we've tried to come up with a somewhat of a solution anyway, to help for the many users that that have Chromebooks and are trying to and need access to accessibility tools when they're taking the end of the year assessments. So just to do a little bit of background on this, I'm sure everyone is familiar with this, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page. But about half the states, and of course we're focused more on the West Coast here, but about half the states in the U.S. use the Common Core tests from either PARCC or Smarter Balanced. I know here we're concerned with Smarter Balanced, but the other half of the states in the U.S., they make their own test. But even if, well, they don't make their own test, they use their own test. So even if they're using their own test, it's generally made by some of the same companies, and they all have the same kind of similarities. And those similarities are that it's going to require a locked down browser. If you're in Chrome, it's got to be in kiosk mode. This means it takes over your entire screen. These testing platforms do have some accessibility tools built in. For example, text-to-speech is common if applicable to the student taking it. but it may be a different voice, may or may not have highlighting, all those sort of things. And then so actually getting access to third-party accessibility tools, I see that says third part instead of third party, actually getting access to those tools can be very difficult because of the whole lockdown browser piece. So Chromebooks brings its own kind of world of issues because of how tests are delivered on Chromebooks. So to give you an idea of how this works in most places, and again, many of you are probably familiar with this, but if you're taking a test on a Chromebook, because that test is delivered in kiosk mode, when you're in kiosk mode, that locks down the entire computer. You don't even sign in to the Chromebook. When you open it up, it'll either go directly to this kiosk application that is a test, or you'll only have an option to click on the kiosk application that will then launch, and that's all you have access to. That's all you can see. So while the test would have open response questions, you would have to respond to those questions. If you needed assistive technology other than what's provided in the test, you would need to answer those questions on a second computer. What then generally happens is a teacher or a test proctor would then have to transcribe those responses back into the testing computer. I was in Colorado, and some of the districts that I was talking with there, they have this same scenario. They have to have a second teacher to make sure the first teacher actually transcribes it over correctly. So it is kind of a crazy thing we have to do to make sure that students are having access to the accommodations that they need. Problems with this. So if you're using a Chromebook, then that second computer that you're using to respond to questions with, it's going to need access to the internet. That's kind of a foundational thing for Chromebooks to be very useful, is they need access to the internet. And they're going to need that because their accessibility tools are probably coming in the form of extensions like Read&Write for Google Chrome or other extensions. You can't lock that second computer down in kiosk mode because kiosk mode doesn't allow extensions. If kiosk mode allowed extensions, that would get rid of the whole two-computer thing to start with. And because you can't lock it down in kiosk mode and you need internet, that poses a problem because that means students could open up new tabs and Google Answers and all that kind of stuff. So that's the main problem that we see here. So what we've come up with, and I realize it doesn't solve all the problems, but hopefully is a short-term solution for many of you, is that we've developed something called Read&Write for assessments. It is its own app that is a writing environment. I'll show you some screenshots and can do a live demo here as well if helpful. But it's its own application that's a writing environment that has the same Read&Write toolbar at the top built into the application that you can use to write and respond to questions with. So students would have access to all the normal Read&Write for Google Chrome supports, including the online dictation piece. So the beauty of having this as an app instead of an extension is that you can launch this in kiosk mode on that second computer. That means that you'll still have two computers, right? One computer is going to have the test, but the other computer you can launch Read&Write for assessments in kiosk mode. That eliminates those security concerns about having access to the internet. That means you can have access to the internet, so students can have access to online prediction, online speech input, those sort of things, but they won't be able to Google Answers and all the things that are general concerns when testing. So to give you an idea what that looks like, the second computer that a student would respond to questions with would open up in this kiosk application called Read&Write for assessments. You would see, this is kind of a really early build that I have, that's why it says supported learning there. But it would still require a test proctor like before or a teacher like before. And you would just go through and tick on or off the features that the student is allowed to have, right? So probably allowed to have text-to-speech, probably allowed to have prediction, probably allowed to have the speech input stuff. Not sure about spell check and dictionaries and those sort of things, but you can easily tick those off. Then you just continue, and that'll take you right to this writing area. And in this writing area, students would be able to respond to any of the test questions, and they'd be able to use tools like word prediction. You've got the translator here, dictionary. Again, only if you allow them. The microphone option here is the dictation tool. We call it talk and type in Read&Write. But it's the same icon, similar toolbar that what the student would always see whenever they're working in Google Docs or the web or anywhere like that. So it's a very, very similar experience. It's the same services running in the background, so they should be getting the same results that they get when they're using Read and Write elsewhere. But it's on that second computer as a kiosk app, so you don't have to worry about them closing it down or going out and Googling answers or anything like that. Just an example of what that looks like. This is me typing. I typed QUI, and it obviously just predicts the words. That's QUI. If you have access to the picture dictionary, you can hover over the word, and it'll give you a picture of that. So it will work just like if you're writing in Google Docs. Because this is a testing platform, it's a little bit different. Predict ahead is turned off. So if you're using Read and Write for Google in Google Docs, and you type a word and hit space, it'll automatically predict a word ahead for you. That's turned off for testing scenarios. That's a requirement in pretty much every high stakes assessment in any state that I've ever came across. So that's turned off by default here as well. So that's the idea. It really is kind of simple. I know it's not the perfect solution because it still requires two computers, but that's where we are now, and this is available now for anyone that wants to use it and install it. I should say, I know that it looked like about 70% of the people on here were technical. So it is a Chrome app. So if you have a Google domain, like Google for Education domain, and the students are using Google Docs and those sort of things, basically the way that would work is we have a set of instructions we can send you. You would go to the Google Admin Console. You would search for and find the Read and Write for Assessments app. You can then deploy that out as a kiosk application to manage devices, so devices Chrome devices that you're managing. And then the way that would work is just like any other. It works just like the test that you would be deploying in the same way. Whenever they open that device, they would see the Read and Write for Assessments option, or it would just open right into Read and Write for Assessments to where they could begin responding to questions there. So I'll just go through a couple of things here just to say kind of where we're working on for here in case that answers any questions that may come up. And then Nora, I'll pause for a couple of minutes because I imagine this is where most of the questions will come in at. Right, so for the longer term, we really hope this is a short-term solution because we believe that you having to use two computers like a separate computer to respond to stuff, and then an educator or test proctor having to type that back in, we don't think that's a good solution. It's just that Read and Write is an extension, and extensions aren't allowed in kiosk mode at the moment. So this is kind of the best we can do in the short term. Longer term, we're not the only company. We're talking to Google. Testing providers are talking to Google. Everybody's working together. We're in conversations. I really hope that by this time next year, you'll be able to open a testing app in kiosk mode, and you'll be able to use approved extensions that's both approved by the testing provider and by the district for the students who actually have access to those tools. That's the goal. I think that'll happen. It's just not a fast-moving thing. Also, internally, in case that doesn't work, we're considering making our own secure browser extension. The idea on something like that would be that you would launch a secure browsing extension, and as an administrator, you would set up kind of a password, and you would basically identify the only URLs that a student can visit. So imagine the URL of the test, and then you would allow any extensions that you wanted to. And so then the student would basically be using the Chrome web browser, but could only visit the URL you provided and could only use the extensions you provided. There would be some work there. We'd have to work with testing providers on that to make sure they allow it. But TextHelp's been around for a long time. We have good relationships with most of the testing providers. So we're looking at potentially doing something like this, but we really hope that in the longer term that we'll be able to have a native solution in kiosk mode that we'll be working with Google and testing providers on. So there's other stuff I want to bring up for the Windows users, and I'm going to show DataDesk here briefly as well. But I think now, should I just look through the comments there to answer questions, Nora, or Greg? Do you want to fire some off? Or?
Yeah. So Jason, Nora, and I have been answering some of the questions. There are a couple I think you could maybe elaborate on at this time. You might have touched on it, but so one is, what is the best way to ensure that the students that need accessibility have read and write, and those that don't?
Well, this is going to be the same thing. You know, even in a standard, on a any student that gets access to these tools, right? You're going to have that identified ahead of time. I think they call it a personal needs profile or something like that is usually what the testing providers would call it. So the way that Read and Write for assessments would work is it would be deployed by more than likely someone on the technical side of things to the devices that you knew were going to be used by the students who have access. You would never deploy Read and Write for assessments out to all Chromebooks or anything like that. And so it would only be available on the computers that you knew the students that needed access would have. So that's the answer specifically for Read and Write for assessments. I mean, in general, with Read and Write for Google, you can always choose to deploy it to whoever you deem appropriate to deploy it to.
Thanks, Jason. One more question. Is there an easy support line when support in Google? Is there an easy support line when set up in Google Admin?
An easy support line. Sorry, I'm getting feedback here. There we go. I'm not sure exactly what you mean, like a support line into Google from the Google Admin Console. I know they have a method, or if you're talking specifically about communicating with text help, I mean, we definitely have support channels through email or phone calls or all that, and to walk you through it. But we also have a very detailed guide of how this works, like it walks you through everything you do in the Google Admin Console that Greg and Nora can send out, that will explain exactly how you would go about deploying this.
So I think most of you, if you went through the invite that we sent a number of links in the invite, but I will go ahead and follow up after the webinar with links on exactly how you can contact us. We've got screenshots from the Google Admin Console showing exactly what you do. And for those of you who might be listening to this as a recorded webinar, I will put those links in the video description so you can find them as well.
Right, very good. And I have walked through this. Thanks, Nora. I've walked through this with a couple of Google admins and districts, and the directions are correct. We walk through it step by step. There are a few steps, but that's kind of the way the admin console is set up. But it is step by step. We'll show you how to do that. So. Right. Okay. So I'm going to crack on here, but we can, after we get through this, we can take some more questions if needed. Good to know you guys are replying as we go. So other stuff that may help. Data Desk. Data Desk is something pretty new for text help, and it's going to continue to evolve. Here, I'm just going to stick to how it can help for testing or prepping for testing. If you go to, so if you use Read and Write, you would be able to go to datadesk.texthelp.com and sign in. And now currently this is a very googly solution, which works out because everyone here is Google users. Because what we've done is we've relied on Google Classroom to help us here. And the reason for that is at Text Help, student privacy, data protection, all that is super important for us. Like, we value that above all else. Because of that, it makes it really difficult to show student names when using Read and Write and give like some analytics that people want access to. But we're working on solutions that will help for that. And the way Data Desk works is if you have a Google Classroom, if you have a classroom set up through Google Classroom, and even if you don't use Google Classroom, it's very easy to just go to classroom.google.com and set one up. If you have a Google for Education domain, it's completely free. Anybody can go in and set a class up. I've set a class up just to practice with it. Then when you sign in to Data Desk, you'll see a list of any classes that you've set up. And here in this screenshot, I only have one class available. But it would show you any student that's in that class. And from there, you'd be able to tick all students or just one or two students and go through and turn on or off any feature that you didn't want a student to have access to. So this is really useful if, maybe the test isn't one of the tests that's in kiosk mode, right? Maybe it's a practice test or something like that you'd be able to do. But this allows you as more of an administrator to go in and turn features on or off for students for testing or practice tests or any kind of other, maybe not the high stakes assessment that's in its own kind of separate kiosk application, but it gives you a way to control those features. Now, eventually, data desk is going to be important because we're going to continue to build this out. The next thing that will be available is you'll be able to see analytics, meaning usage by the for these classrooms and the students in these classrooms. And then eventually we'll also offer some administrative analytics. That's for the whole domain, or you can break it down for school and all that kind of stuff. And that's things that'll come later on, but data desk will be the foundation for all those sort of things. Then kind of on the same thing, if you are using Read and Write for Windows, a common thing right now that happens actually is that the primary computer would be a Chromebook and the test would be in a kiosk application, but the second computer would be a Windows computer, and it would just run our full version of Read and Write for Windows, but they would unplug it from the internet due to the concerns that I mentioned earlier. And if this is the case, you can still, there is an exam mode available. You're going to get access to these things and links to the support articles that tell you how to do it and all that, but basically you'd be able to log into Read and Write for Windows and lock features on or off, turn features on or off, and keep it locked that way, a password protected thing, so that students would only have access to the tools that are approved for them. So that would work if you're doing that scenario to where your second computer is a Windows device, where you're using it without the internet, for example. And I should also mention, if you're a Windows user, that it's different because it's not in kiosk mode. It does still come. The test does. Smarter Balance test does still come in a locked browser mode, but there are things you'll probably want to do to try to request a more accessible version of that, so you can use tools like Read and Write if you're going that route. So I did kind of fly through that, but that's Read and Write for assessments. The idea behind it is it's pretty straightforward. It's a separate app. It's a separate kiosk app that you're going to be able to use that has access to all the tools that you would normally have access to, and then hopefully that makes sense that we want this to be a temporary solution and for everyone to have a better solution moving forward to where extensions do work in kiosk mode. I can take another question here, Greg or Nora, if needed, specifically on that. Otherwise, Nora, you'd ask that I just move on and briefly mention RIQ before bringing it back to you guys?
Let's go ahead and answer. We've had quite a few questions. I think one of these will be pretty quick and easy to answer. We had one of our tech people was asking if they'd have to set up a separate OU.
No. No, you wouldn't. You just nope. You deploy this the same way. You already have your OUs lined out and all that stuff. But the way that the deployment works for kiosk apps is you deploy it to the device and not to the student, which is different, right? Because usually, if you're deploying an extension, you deploy it to an organizational unit. But kiosk apps, you deploy to devices, so you have to have that. You have to have the managed device thing that you get. I think there's a fee associated with it. Like it's a one-time fee, or it covers 3 years or something like that. But whenever you buy Chromebooks, you do the managed device thing, and that allows you to deploy the app directly to the device, not to. That's an important distinction, because you don't deploy it to the student, because the students don't even sign in. They just go right into so they never even sign into it. So that's why you deploy it to the device.
Great. Here's another question. It sounds like we'd still need 2 devices. So not sure how this would be better. Wouldn't the teacher still need to transcribe to the secure browser kiosk environment? And then following that is a question I think kind of answers some of that question, which is, can you set the voice and rate in the kiosk mode, or are you stuck with the SBAC voice, and how much does the kiosk app cost?
Right, so I can cover most of these. The benefit is, I probably didn't do a very good job of explaining it before. You are correct, it requires 2 computers. We know that's not good. The problem is that if you're using a second computer, you would normally have to, you couldn't, if your second computer was a Chromebook, you couldn't just open up and use Read and Write, because you'd have to have that Chromebook unplugged from the internet. Otherwise, students would go and Google Answers, right? So the kiosk mode allows you to launch this kiosk app that has Read and Write in it, so that you can use all the tools in Read and Write and be connected to the internet without having the security concerns of them going out and Googling answers. Otherwise, you'd have to unplug it from the internet. You wouldn't have online dictation, which means it would not be a good experience. You wouldn't have the online word prediction. So that's the advantage of using this app. Even though, yes, it's on a second computer, it allows you to have online access and do all the things you would normally do, but you still have to transcribe it over to the testing computer. And then there's some other questions. The pricing thing, if you're a Read and Write customer already, you get access to this. There's not an additional cost for it. And was there another
and then
part
to confirm, you'd get our high quality speech input and our high quality voices that were totally, customizable within the range of the toolbar. So definitely, like probably a smoother experience than what you'd have inside the SBAC environment.
It is, it still isn't perfect just because, like you said, you only have our voices on the second computer, right? We don't have a way to get our voices on the testing computer, but definitely for when the students are typing their answers and then want to go back and hear from the high quality voices how it sounds, they would definitely have access to those things.
Mm-hmm. And another question here, I think, probably many of us are coming at this from the same place. We know that the testing consortia need for things to be very secure. So another question was to confirm there is no way that you would be able to print from the Read and Write for Assessment app, correct?
That is correct. There's no print button. This is like a state-by-state battle. Like 3 states are really requesting a print button, and all the other states are saying, no, we can't have a print button. So there will not be a print button. There's no way to print it, save it. There's no way to do anything with it. It just stays there, and then when you close out the app, it's gone forever. So.
Yep. Okay. And then we've got some questions about using the masking feature. Somebody's saying what SBAC calls masking is kind of a joke.
Right. So the screen masking feature for responses, that's a good question, actually. I don't know that I don't know that, I know I should know this, but I just need to back up a couple of slides. The screen masking feature is actually not because now it would only be right for the response. It wouldn't be on the SBAC thing. But the screen masking tool is not a tool that is in Read and Write for assessments, mainly because we were under the understanding that which may be incorrect, but I don't think that's allowable on some tests, or not like an accommodation that's listed on some. But if that's needed, that's something we can, I don't know if we can have it like in the next 30 days, but that's definitely something that we can add to the list that you can turn on or off, from the first panel that you come to.
Using that feature switch, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, definitely.
That is super good. We're getting some great questions, and I want to make sure we answer those. Here's another one. My assessment team is requesting step-by-step instructions for the 2 Chromebook solutions specifying personnel requirements. Can you provide them?
Sure. If well, I mean, so what we have is step-by-step solutions or step-by-step instructions on what you do with the second computer. What you do with the first computer with the test on it is the same that you've always done. There is zero difference about that, right? That you're going to deploy the testing app from SBAC on the first computer. The second computer you deploy our Read and Write app, and we definitely have step-by-step instructions on what that entails and how it works and all that sort of stuff. If that's not enough for you, just definitely let us know, and we'll be able to provide any additional information that you need.
Great. Let's see. I think we've gotten to most of our questions here. Let me make sure there's no other. Some of them are kind of similar to the other questions. I want to make sure we haven't missed anything. Nope. Asking how to save work. Do you need to enter so does Read and Write for assessments require a license to be entered?
No, when you open it up, no. It's if you're already a Read and Write customer, we give you access to this, and nothing else is done. The student or the teacher or the administrator, nobody has to enter any extra admin codes or anything like that.
Yep. One more question here: can the Read and Write for Windows software work with a secure browser without the use of a transcriber when using permissive mode?
So that is a thing. It's not the best experience, so it depends on not all tools will work, and for speech you generally have to use the screenshot reader. For prediction, it's a little tricky. You have to use like the number keys instead of clicking on it just because of how it's set up. So it's possible. It's just not the best experience due to how even the permissive mode is still pretty locked down, if that makes sense. But definitely if you're using a Windows machine, I would definitely take a look at that, right? Kind of what we're talking about here is more about if you have Chromebooks, and that's not an option because it's all in a kiosk app. There's no permissive mode. But if you're on Windows computers, then definitely look at the permissive mode and using it with Read and Write for Windows.
Okay. One last question. In SBAC, they do not let you listen to your text after you write. Will that be allowed on the kiosk mode? So, Jason, you might want to kind of refresh people's memory about that feature switch. So that is something that you could actually turn off on the feature switch If that's
Yeah.
not something that's allowed in your state, then you can absolutely do that.
Yeah, it says speech. We're going to change that to text to speech just to be more clear. But yeah, if you untick that, there won't be any speech. Same way with click to speak. It's actually very, I don't know why we have it listed twice. But anyways, you can turn those off, and then that will not be an option.
Yes. Okay. And so we have some questions. People are asking if they only require speech input, would they be able to use the speech input built into the Google OS on the Chromebook? Is there any built-in feature that would allow them to use that in kiosk mode?
So, but we're talking in a single. I know it's hard because we're this is kind of not a live thing, and they would have to type the response. Yeah. But if you're depends on what you're asking. I would guess that is locked out of, but you would have to double check to see what Smarter Balance provides access to on that. Like I know they have some text to speech stuff, right? My understanding is that they do not have any type of speech input availability there that you can use in that kiosk mode.
We can check on that.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I think we can check on that, but that's pretty much what I've been hearing from folks, is that there's not really much going on as far as speech input inside the SBAC environment.
No, there's not, and you can't really access a lot of the accessibility tools in kiosk mode, and also there's weird technical things. Like when you do that, you have to allow access to the microphone, and I'm pretty sure kiosk mode blocks that thing that comes up. So even if you could get access, I don't think you could allow access. So there's a lot of complications there. But now if you're using the Read and Write for Assessments app, we have the speech input stuff built in there that's, kind of based on the same stuff. So
great. So just to let all you folks know that are asking these great questions, we will definitely follow up with you after the webinar. And I'm hearing what kind of resources that folks need. So I'll make sure that Greg and I get a chance to send these out to you after the webinar. And also for those of you that are watching the recorded webinar, we'll make sure that we post those things so that you can access them after the webinar as well. I wanted Jason to have a chance to show you, since we're here talking about assessments, something really exciting that's coming very soon from Text Help, and it's called WriteQ. It's going to let you do progress monitoring for writing. It's pretty awesome.
Right, so I will do my best to fly through this. I know you guys specifically tuned in to look at Read and Write for assessments for the kind of the kiosk solution, but this WriteQ product is something we've been working on for a while to help with, as it says, writing assessment and keeping track of that, especially at kind of at a district or a large population setting there. So WriteQ's been around for a bit, but you may not have heard of it. It's something that we kind of put out as a free add-on for Google Docs a while back. And the reason we did that is because we're often out talking with folks like you and at conferences and trying to see what's going on that people are struggling with. And one thing we know from a teacher perspective is that scoring student writing is time-consuming and tedious work. And if you're a high school English language arts teacher with 4 classes and 30 kids in each one, and they're all writing personal narratives, it gets really difficult to give the same amount of work and effort into scoring each of those before you kind of go into default mode and say, yeah, that's okay kind of stuff. So we know it's a time-consuming process. And another thing that's, I think, even more important, especially at the district level, is it's very subjective. If I had a student writing in my hand and I handed that to everyone in this webinar, I would get back that many different responses, right? Because everyone grades writing a little bit differently. Some people think some things are better than others, and so on. This creates a problem. Oftentimes states put millions of dollars into writing grants, and then how do we know if writing grants work if we're all assessing the way students write differently? And so that's kind of where WriteQ comes in. We know that there are a lot of metrics out there that really show true writing progress. And so, for example, the number of errors is one thing, right? Like if the more errors you're making, the worse that would be. And you want to make fewer errors, and that could be grammar, spelling, punctuation. There are things like the maturity of the vocabulary that you use, correct word sequences and incorrect word sequences that you see on the screen. There's some literature behind that, but basically the idea is if you have 2 words next to each other, that's a sequence. And if neither of them have an error, that's a correct sequence. if there is an error with one of them, that creates an incorrect word sequence. And so a lot of research on writing progress, when you get to kind of the higher ed and literature reviews and stuff like that, use things like correct word sequences. So we know that these things exist. We also know that we can track things like the amount of time students spend writing, a lot of other metrics that we can look at. But if everyone was looking at the same metrics, then we could get a better picture for how students are progressing or not progressing. And that's where RIQ comes in. So RIQ currently is an add-on, but really, really soon, like in a couple of weeks, we're going to have a brand new extension. This extension will be completely free for you to use. It's a free tool for educators to assess student docs. It's going to be right in Google Docs, so you don't have to worry about like creating, like it's not something you have to get kids to go and log into some portal and write there and, you know, respond to specific prompts or anything like that. But any writing that a student does, it'll automatically score all those metrics plus more that I spoke about earlier. It even includes rubrics that we put together based on kind of a more of a national norm set. In the future, you'll be able to add your own rubrics, and then most importantly, you'll be able to track progress over time. To give you an idea of what it looks like, the RIQ extension, you can be in any document, and if you look over to the right, there's a little tab with a kind of a Q on it. That's the RIQ logo there. If you turn it on, it'll go ahead and underline any errors in the document. You can agree or disagree with those errors as needed. You can even mark more errors. It all works directly in Google Docs. If you use the previous version, you know it was kind of this whole pop-up kind of thing. This allows you to work through and make comments as you go along. Then you'll be able to see, then you'll be able to see kind of a synopsis of all the different errors and metrics and things like this. This is a screenshot instead of so I can't actually scroll down to show you, but it would list all those metrics for you to see. And then same way you continue on, the rubrics are built in. So you look at all, we have rubrics for grade levels and the specific genre that students are writing in. So remember, as you do this, this is all just being saved in the background to give you a really good picture of how students are doing, but then it's going to, you'll be able to use that to track progress over time. There's even a summary screen. It'll give you a RIQ score, which I can explain more about, but you can enter feedback. You can, it gives you a synopsis of all the errors. It gives you the same way with the rubric score, and then allows you to send that feedback to the student and actually put it in the document so they would be able to see that. So I know I'm flying through this, but to give you an idea is, first, it's going to be really, really easy for teachers to score student documents, right? Next, there's going to be this really useful educator dashboard. And I think I put some screenshots in here to show you what we're working towards. But it'll have really rich information that shows student writing progress over time. You can look at it at the individual level or the class level. We're even going to expand that to the district level. So we've done this thing to where, using the free version of RIQ that's been out for a couple of years now, we have tens of thousands of teacher verified scored documents and have a huge data set. So for the first time ever, we've actually been able to establish writing norms that no one's really seen before. So we'll be able to tell you, based on what a student scores on writing, how that compares to, if they're a fifth grade student, how that compares to other fifth graders across the nation, for example. And while that's really powerful to know how a student's trending compared to, national norms, you've got to think that if you're using this in your district, after you use it, you'll be able to set benchmarks for your own local district norms, right? And a year from now, you'll be able to see, hey, are students doing better or worse or remaining the same? If you bought software to help with writing, or have a writing initiative that you've put money into, you'll be able to see if that's making a difference. Again, assuming the teachers are all using RIQ to score the assignments. And as I mentioned, we'll have custom rubrics. And then even longer term from that, kind of the next phase will be a student version. And the best way I know to say the student version, yeah, there'll be the free part that allows students to see their feedback and stuff. But we really want this to be like a Fitbit for writing. So if any of you wear a Fitbit, I know, for example, that I need 106 more steps in this hour, right? And it nudges me to make good decisions when it comes to my health. We want the RIQ student version to do the same thing for student writing, encourage them when they're doing good work, encourage them to do more good work and write more and set goals and all those sort of things. So that's where RIQ will head. And when students start doing that, you'll be able to see the difference it's making because of, again, that rich data source that you'll have at the teacher level, but also at the district level. And here's just an example of kind of that dashboard. If you imagine, as a teacher, you would log in and see your classes, and you see all the scores for your classes. You could click on a class, and then that would take you in and show you all the data for each student and show you trend lines and if they're above or below grade level and really let you dig into how they're progressing and all that sort of stuff. These are really early kind of UI screenshots that I have, but I wanted to give you an idea of where it's going there. But in general, that's RIQ. I hope that makes sense. I wanted to tell you guys about it because it will be rolling out here in a couple of weeks. The version that rolls out will be completely free and allow teachers to go in and score documents. The earlier you start using it, the earlier then you'll be able to start setting those benchmarks for your district and see if you're making writing improvement or not. So that's the idea with RIQ. Happy to answer any questions with that. But knowing we have 15 minutes left as well, Nora, you can definitely take control of this so that you can get through the last few questions and slides as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jason. I know this has been just absolutely a ton of information to share with all of you, but I will share just a little bit more with you. Let's see if you'll be seeing my screen shortly. There we go. All right, so hopefully you're seeing my screen. I will share these slides with everyone after. If you kind of want to think about how you might use the Read and Write tools to prepare for the assessments, I have a little hyperdoc. This is all open source stuff that you guys can play with. But I took an SBAC practice question and made it into a hyperdoc lesson for you here. So feel free to play with this if you want to kind of get a feel for how you might go back and forth between sort of preparing students for the test and being ready for the test. I wanted to just do one poll here where we can kind of get a feel for what kind of challenges you might have in supporting your students, so we can get a feel for if there's anything else that we can do for you today to help with that. So some different options here. We'll see what kind of response we get. See, people are reading through these options. We've got giving access to grade level content, supporting the writing process, offering equitable access to assessments, helping students demonstrate their process when they're writing, and reinforcing standards mastery. So we'll give you just a few moments to answer those and just kind of get a feel for, you know, how this relates back to what's happening in, you know, classroom instruction. So we'll give you another couple of minutes here, a couple of moments. All right, it looks like we are, go ahead and share that poll. So pretty interesting. I think we're all focused on offering equitable access to assessments, but I think we all see that there are lots of things going on as far as accessing grade level content and students being able to show what they know, that we want to make sure that we're also sharing with our students. So I think most of you on this webinar are familiar with Read and Write, so I'm going to kind of skip over that, that demonstration, but I did want to talk about some of the new features in Read and Write that you may or may not be using already. So I wanted to talk about the Check It feature. So I'm not sure how many of you are aware of the Check It feature. It's probably been out for about 2 or 3 months. And when that was introduced, I'm going to, hopefully you can see my screen okay. I am going over here into my options for my Read and Write toolbar, and here I am inside a Google Doc. And you've got all your speech options, your prediction options, all those great things. I'm going to go over here to features, and the default is that Check It is turned off. So I wanted to make, you saw when I turned it off, Check It disappeared from the far left of my toolbar. When I turn that back on, Check It becomes available. So if any of you are still wondering, like, gosh, where's that Check It and how do I get it? Just know that you need to go over here into your options. And Check It is our way of looking at grammar, spelling, punctuation, helping students with the sort of mechanics. And those of you that have been working with us for a long time know that, you know, we are an educational company. We're not creating you know, something that might be used by adults in the workplace where you just press a button and it magically changes all your errors. We want students to learn what they need to do. And you can see that Google is making some suggestions as to what needs to happen here. But if students want more supportive suggestions, they can click on the Check It button. You know that it's on because the little purple line has appeared under Check It. So it is an on-demand thing. It's not there all the time being distracting. And then as we click on the questionable items that are underlined in purple, we get some suggestions for how we might want to change those. But I just want to point out that, you know, we're letting the students make that determination of what they were trying to say and what's accurate. We're not just pressing a magic button and changing it so that it's, you know, correct. They're actually learning as part of this process. And then most of you know that we do come from the learning disabilities community, so we know that some spelling errors are, you know, purely a function of slipping on the keyboard, but a lot of times for a lot of our students, they are issues of auditory discrimination. So our suggestions for school also include words that sound a lot like school, like scroll or skill. So you can see as we go through here, it's going to offer a lot of different kinds of suggestions for us. And it's pretty smart. It knows what we're talking about. So we said Pledge of Allegiance. And I won't do the whole thing, but I wanted you guys to just know how to get that. And then if I turn it off, goes away, turn it on, it comes back. So definitely give that a shot if you want to play with it a little bit more. I'm definitely happy to explore with you in your districts. I also wanted to talk about data. If we're talking about assessment, probably many of you are interested in finding out more. So we do have a data dashboard that will allow you to look at what's going on in your district for any period of time. You can look for just a month or a semester or a year, and we look at what's going on in your district, and we can also break that down by how your toolbar is being used. So when you're thinking about, you know, how you really want to influence what's going on and how you can really help your students, we can help you by looking at this data and using that to really drive your professional development and how you're using the tool. So if any of you want to talk about that, definitely reach out to me and we can do that. I think Jason already talked about the data desk. Jason, did you want to share a little bit more about where we're going with the data desk in the future with like student level data?
Sure. I briefly mentioned it there, but yeah, the idea being, I'd mentioned how we always have data privacy and security concerns. So the reason that we're linking up with Classroom right now is because we don't know who any student is, right? Like when they log in, as soon as they log in with their Google ID, that's immediately encrypted, and on our end, it's stored as a bunch of random numbers and letters. So we don't know who any of the students are. However, when that's encrypted, it's always encrypted with the same kind of random numbers and letters. So we can't really re-engineer it. We don't know who it is, but when Classroom tells us the student, you know, that'll encrypt those the same way and it'll let us pull data. Basically, it's a complicated way of saying that if you connect in with Classroom, we'll be able to show you at the student level, you know, what the usage looks like. You can see it at the classroom level, also at the student level. If you have a certain group of students that you want to track usage for and things like that, you could always just build a class with those students in it, and then you could track usage for those individual students. For example, if you're doing progress monitoring, like in a special ed kind of scenario, to where student has to have access to a tool and you want to see how often they're using it and those sort of things. So we'll have all that built in. That's actually coming very, very soon. It'll be in the month of March that'll be available. And then past that, we have bigger plans for like more of an administrative kind of domain or district-wide view that can break down by school and that sort of thing.
That is excellent news. We always learn something new when we talk to Jason. So I'm really excited to hear how close the release of that is. I wanted to make sure to bring that forward. I know that a lot of people that are joining us are, you know, case managers in special education who may not be as familiar with Google Classroom and may not be using it as much. But if you have case management, you could absolutely set up a classroom with the students in your caseload, and you could, you know, right now, You could use those feature switching. If you wanted to turn on and off specific features for any of your students, you could do that. And then moving forward, you'd be able to look at those students and pull out specific data, which any of you that are involved in IEP meetings will probably be delighted to have some of that specific data. So just, you know, refreshing that this is on the way. We still are very, very serious about data privacy at TextHelp. We never know what your individual students are doing. We do know that, you know, many of our districts already partner with Google. So if we can convey that information to you through Google Classroom, we're very, very happy to do that and still have that information be private from TextHelp. So know that that's coming, and there'll be lots for you to do there. I think we're kind of getting ready to round things up here. I will share these slides for you. I've got lots of news and exciting stuff. For those of you that are still, you know, talking about how to get digital text, I have some slides here on how to scan. For those of you who are thinking about funding things for next year, we do have a number of districts that have been very successful in funding their district license through the ESSA Title IV. And this is a correlation to that that you'll be able to look at. I'll make sure that you get access to that. But if you're planning ahead for next year, this is a great place to start. And with that in mind, I just want to kind of take a one last poll here. Any of you that need help accessing Read and Write for assessments, this is the place where you can, you know, kind of raise a hand and say, please, please, please contact me directly. I'll be sending that information out, but any of you that need that, we'll be sending it out. All right, I'll give it just another moment for any of you that need that extra support. I want to give you a chance to ask for it. Okay, so looks like we're all set there. So I think that will conclude our session with you today. We're so glad that you joined us. We had lots of great questions. We'll be following up there for you. And if you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me and Greg. We want to thank Jason for bringing us the latest and greatest today. It's always great to hear from you, Jason. I learn something new every time.
I appreciate it. You're too kind. I appreciate everybody listening to me, and hopefully it was somewhat helpful.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We really appreciate it.